The sentence arrived in the middle of a routine meeting, wrapped in a laugh that did not match the weight of the words. She leaned back in her chair, looked around the table, and announced that she could perform my job while asleep. The comment floated across the room with a light tone, yet it struck with surprising accuracy. It was the kind of remark people pretend is harmless, even as it exposes what they truly think. I watched the faces around me respond before I had the chance to process my own reaction. A few colleagues laughed much faster than necessary, eager to align themselves with whoever held authority. Others shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. This subtle choreography told me more about the room than her statement ever could. I remained still, listening carefully, not for her voice but for the silence that followed. I felt no impulse to defend my work or demand respect. Years of experience teach you that public humiliation only lands when you accept the invitation to respond. Instead, I observed her confidence as she continued speaking, unaware of the shift she had created. It was remarkable how easily a single sentence could reveal an entire hierarchy. What she did not notice was that I had stopped hearing the meeting. I was studying expressions, identifying allies, and recognizing the first fracture in her certainty. I understood in that moment that she believed her position made her untouchable. She assumed the comment would fade quickly. The truth stayed with me long after the meeting ended. When someone underestimates you publicly, they assume you will not respond privately. She never saw the early hours when the building was still dark and the only sound came from the cleaning staff finishing their shift. Those were the moments when the real work happened. I reviewed the operations logs line by line, identifying small inconsistencies that could grow into major failures if ignored. Nothing dramatic, nothing glamorous, just careful attention that kept the entire department stable long before anyone arrived. She never noticed the systems I built from scratch. They were simple in appearance, yet each one connected teams that rarely communicated and solved problems before they reached her desk. The executives assumed the quiet meant everything was naturally under control, unaware that constant adjustments kept the machinery moving. My name rarely appeared anywhere, but the absence of crises spoke loudly enough. She never opened the reports that carried warnings months ahead of time. I created them for leaders who preferred summaries over analysis, and yet the details were what mattered. I watched patterns, tracked discrepancies, and prepared documents that could have prevented several costly errors. They sat untouched because she assumed nothing required her attention unless it arrived with urgency. She never asked how issues resolved themselves. She simply enjoyed the smooth surface, believing it reflected her leadership. Experience teaches you that true stability is the result of quiet labor, not confident speeches. While she focused on visibility, I focused on structure. The audience of seasoned professionals understands this rhythm. Work that is unseen is often the work that protects everyone. I had no need to brag because the outcomes were already living proof of value. In time, the difference between noise and confidence would reveal itself without my intervention. The shift began on a quiet morning when the office felt unusually still. I arrived at my usual time and opened the dashboard that tracked our ongoing projects. In the past, I would scan for irregularities and correct them before anyone noticed. That morning, I kept my hands still. I watched the numbers move without intervention, letting the process follow its natural course. It was not rebellion. It was clarity. I had realized that constant correction had become an invisible service no one respected. By mid-morning, the first signs appeared. A procurement request sat unanswered because it depended on a form she had forgotten to submit. I watched it expire gently, the system following its rules without emotion. A financial report generated an alert that usually required my review. I let it pass to the next level, exactly as the manual instructed. The alert moved slowly through a chain of people who had never seen it before. Throughout the day, emails arrived with small questions that once would have landed only with me. I answered politely, but referred each sender to the official procedure. Nothing dramatic occurred. The building did not shake. Yet something important shifted in the atmosphere. The quiet confidence that everything worked smoothly had begun to crack. What makes this moment powerful for seasoned viewers is the understanding that silence can be strategic. You do not need to harm a system for truth to emerge. You simply let it show what your presence had been holding together. By the time I logged out, a new reality had formed. The consequences were already unfolding without a word from me. The turning point came the next week. During a meeting, she entered with unusual energy. She stood at the front of the room and announced that she would personally oversee the workflow I had managed for years. Her tone carried the enthusiasm of someone stepping into a role she believed would confirm her superiority. The team exchanged careful glances, aware that responsibility had shifted, but uncertain how the transition would unfold. I watched her speak, calm and detached, aware that she believed confidence could replace preparation. She opened the platform I had maintained and narrated her actions, as if demonstrating mastery. Her gestures were broad, her voice assertive, her smile unwavering. She believed she was proving a point. To her, taking over my tasks was a simple way to demonstrate that my work required little expertise. She reassured the executives that she welcomed the challenge and looked forward to streamlining the entire process. Over the next few days, she immersed herself in the system with visible pride. She sent messages announcing her control of key operations and encouraged staff to route everything through her. The atmosphere changed again, not with tension but with anticipation. People recognized the imbalance between her confidence and her experience. They watched with polite interest as she navigated procedures she had never studied. What makes this part resonate with older viewers is the predictability of events. When someone steps into a role without understanding the foundation beneath it, the outcome becomes inevitable. She believed she was showcasing leadership. In reality, she was walking directly toward consequences she could not see. The reversal had begun, and all I needed to do was observe. The unraveling began with a single message that appeared harmless at first glance. It came from a long-standing partner who relied on precise scheduling to keep their supply chain stable. The email asked for updated figures and confirmed delivery timelines. It required careful reading because one detail in the request signaled a shift in their internal calendar. I had handled these adjustments for years, recognizing how a minor change could affect half the department. She scanned the message quickly and forwarded instructions based on her first impression. Within hours, the first deadline slipped. A shipment was prepared too early and held in storage, increasing costs the partner had not anticipated. Another team paused their work, waiting for information that should have reached them earlier. Questions began to circulate subtly, not accusations, but polite inquiries about accuracy. I observed the growing confusion without stepping in, responding only when directly asked and guiding people toward the official thread. She did not realize the ripple had begun. The partner sent a second message seeking clarification, and this time she answered with confident certainty, unaware that her reply contradicted their documented needs. More departments stalled. Meetings were rescheduled. The pattern formed slowly, like a loose thread pulled 1 centimeter at a time. I remained steady, keeping my tone neutral and my presence minimal. This moment resonates deeply with experienced viewers. They know how true failure often starts quietly. No dramatic confrontation. No grand mistake. Only a simple oversight that exposes the difference between someone who understands the work and someone who only believes they do. The tension had begun to rise, and no one could stop its progression. During the following week, the consequences of her decisions began to align in ways that could no longer be ignored. A budget report she had approved without review contained an error so small it initially appeared insignificant. Yet that number fed into 3 separate summaries used by senior management. When the mistake reached the finance director, it triggered an internal check that revealed a series of similar inaccuracies. None were catastrophic on their own, but together they painted a picture of growing instability. Another issue emerged when a client discovered inconsistencies in the timelines she had promised. They contacted leadership directly, asking for reassurance that their contract would not be affected. This inquiry prompted a meeting where several managers compared notes for the first time. They realized separate teams were dealing with problems that traced back to the same lapse in judgment. The room grew quiet as the connections became apparent. No one raised their voice. The evidence was enough. Experience teaches people to notice patterns. Leadership began to study the trend with calm seriousness. They reviewed logs, examined emails, and observed how many corrections had been needed since she took control. Every detail pointed to the same conclusion. The system had not changed. Only the person managing it had. There was no dramatic collapse. Instead, the truth emerged through routine evaluations and accumulated data. Older viewers understand this rhythm well. Accountability is rarely loud. It builds quietly until the weight is undeniable. By the time she recognized the magnitude of the situation, leadership had already formed their assessment. The absence of experience had revealed itself completely, and the consequences were ready to follow. The meeting happened on a Thursday afternoon while I was completing routine tasks at my desk. There was nothing unusual about the day. The corridor was quiet, the offices steady, the rhythm of the building unchanged. I noticed a group of managers walking toward the conference room with folders in hand and expressions that carried a sense of purpose. My name was not on the list posted beside the door, yet the department I once stabilized was the focus of their discussion. I continued my work while they gathered. The closed door signaled nothing personal, only the decisions were being prepared without my presence. Hours passed with no interruptions. The silence surrounding that meeting felt heavier than any confrontation. When the participants finally emerged, their faces revealed neither triumph nor concern. They simply carried the calm of people who had reached a conclusion. I did not ask anyone for details. Experience teaches that clarity arrives without chasing it. Later that evening, as I prepared to log out, an automated notification appeared in my inbox. It was a standard update from the internal system announcing new structural adjustments. I opened the document and read through the changes. Her title had shifted. My responsibilities had been reassigned. The flow chart displayed a new arrangement that reflected the reality leadership had quietly acknowledged. There was no mention of my work or her errors. The document simply showed the organization as it now functioned. What stands out to viewers is the absence of drama. Authority can move without raising its voice. The meeting I was not invited to revealed everything I needed to know about how the story had turned. I understood that the response to her choices had been delivered without a single conversation. This final moment is not directed at her or at the people who watched events unfold. It is meant for anyone who has spent years working quietly, offering stability without recognition. I speak calmly because urgency has no place in wisdom. Time sharpens perspective. Experience earns its own authority. There is no need to raise your voice when your results speak clearly. Many viewers understand the weight of being underestimated. It happens slowly, through remarks that seem harmless and assumptions made by people who mistake silence for weakness. Yet competence does not announce itself. It moves steadily, carrying responsibilities that others overlook. Real skill does not seek applause. It holds the structure together while others chase visibility. If you have ever given your best without acknowledgement, remember this truth. People often overlook the work that protects them because they never have to face the consequences of its absence. They believe a task is simple only because someone capable has been handling it without difficulty. When the responsibility shifts, the reality becomes clear. I offer this reflection to those who have lived long enough to recognize the pattern. You do not need to prove your worth through arguments or demonstrations. Your value is built through consistency. Your strength is visible in the stability you create. Your dignity remains intact even when others fail to see it. Hold to that assurance. People who mock your work often depend on it more than they admit. And people who think a job is easy usually discover the truth after they inherit it.